Hey kids, this is Pulse Ray Vision coming to you live in from Quattro Cinco Studios in my mom's basement with another reading of The Rings of Dust, Chapter 14, Part 1. I'm pretty sure this will be a two-parter. It's got a long one there. And we'll just jump into it. I might pause and write down some notes as we're going through this, but if you've been listening to this playlist, I hope you're enjoying it at this point. And I'm happy to read this to you guys so you guys don't have to mess with text to speed. So let's jump into it. I'm going to just dive right into chapter 14, which is Saturn's Edge. All right. The bunk was the smallest on the Golden Dawn, which is why Cole had taken it. He sat on the edge of the mattress with his elbows on his knees and his hands empty. The ring was with Sharon, hummingbird feeder wire bent around a smooth pebble. He'd pressed it into her hand in the cabin driveway, and she closed her fingers around it and said, "I will." He did not know where it was now. He did not know where she was now. Both of those things had the same weight. He was not crying. That part had already moved through him. The corridor, the locked door, the fist against the wall. He'd cried in the corridor outside the comm station after Taylor's voice had said the words. He'd cried in the head. Oh, with the door locked, with one of his fists pressed against the bulkhead until his knuckles had bruised. He'd cried with Ricardo on the floor of the galley while Bitboy chittered low and worried from the top of the refrigerator. He had not cried since. He had insisted what he had instead was a list. Items in order. 1. Saturn. 2. 6 hours out. The B-ring sectors lit up on the scope like a cold weather map. 2. The harvesters. 7 of them deployed and ripe, drifting in the high-density vapor lanes. Mission critical. 3. Taylor. 26 hours out, not 6 hours out, sorry. He pressed his thumb against the place on his palm where the ring had sat. She used to set her own thumb against her lower lip when she was thinking. He closed his eyes for a moment, and he opened them again. 3. Taylor. Sub-item A. Taylor knew before they left Earth that Sharon would be dead by the time they got to Saturn. Sub-item B. Taylor had presumably been in contact with whoever ordered it. Sub-item C. Taylor was, at this moment, sitting in his console 2 decks up, doing his job to mission spec, doing the small, clean version of his job like a man, doing the small, clean version of his job a man like him did to keep his cover. Sub-item D. Taylor had to live through Saturn. Whatever came after Saturn went first. The mission went first. Cole had spent 15 years not letting personal weather sink a mission, and he was not going to start now. 4. The shadow. Whatever had been following them since the inner belt crossing. No confirmed contact. Iris hadn't flagged a registry, but Cole had felt a mass displacement in the long-range passive sensor data and understood what it meant. Saturn's approach ring was a closing window. Any vessel running an intercept had to commit or turn back once they were inside the harvest corridor. He had 26 hours. After that, the window decided itself. He pressed his palm flat against his knee and held it there. Bitboy, curled at the foot of the bunk, lifted his head. The chimp's ethanol cell hummed faintly in the small space, a sound like a refrigerator considering its options. 2 of his mechanical limbs were folded against his belly in sleep. The third was hooked with the casual death grip he'd developed in his cage years around Cole's left ankle. The other 3 were doing whatever Bitboy's other 3 limbs did when no one was watching. "Hey, buddy," Cole said quiet. Bitboy made a small interrogative noise that meant, "Are we doing the thing yet?" "Not yet," Cole said. "Soon. Go back to sleep." Bitboy did not go back to sleep. Bitboy never went back to sleep when Cole was sitting like that. Cole let his hand fall to the chimp's head and rested there. Bitboy's blue-stained mouth, still faintly purple from the blackberry preserves at the cabin 6 weeks ago and a galaxy back, turned and pressed into Cole's wrist. Yeah, Cole said, I know. He looked at the bulkhead and let his head go where it wanted. His head wanted the cabin. He'd seen her once before the cabin, a port of entry on the California coast, 18 months before the Polaris had been moving through the commercial lane, with a case that didn't match the manifest, black market parts, the kind of cargo that gets you arrested if the wrong officer opens it. Alpha had bought every aftermarket parts patent the Federation used and priced the supply chain into a chokehold. If you needed a pressure seal or a thruster coil, you paid Alpha's markup, or your ship sat in dock. Sharon was the chokehold's answer. Cole had been the officer. He had looked at the case and looked at her and understood, in under 30 seconds, that she was worth the risk. He had stamped the form and waved her through, a decorated Federation captain helping a smuggler walk contraband past his own checkpoint, because something about the way she carried the case and the way she looked at him when he hesitated made him decide. She had gone. She'd gone back to space. She had not forgotten him. It was 5 years before page 1, and the snow had been on the ground for a week. It was 5 years before page 1. He'd been sitting on the porch with a quarter bottle of bourbon and a wool blanket, and Bitboy in a hoodie that was much too big for him, watching the valley fill up with the blue end-of-day light that you only get at altitude. The pines made the noise pines made, the steady whispered argument of a forest that had been having the same conversation for 2 centuries. The smoke from the chimney was a slow column against the sky. The cabin was warm at its back. He'd been a year out of the Federation by then, on what his discharge papers called indefinite personal leave and what he called the rest of his life. The drone passed at 6:12. He knew it was 6:12 because he'd glanced at his watch when he heard it, the rotor sound. The drone made the wrong kind of rotor sound, not commercial, not Park Service, not the thin, reedy whine of one of the surveillance birds the local sheriff used for the meth cooker haulers, and Cole had spent enough time in the Federation to know what the sound was. The drone was Federation. The drone was running the ridge. He had watched it pass over the lake without moving from the rocking chair. The drone had not been looking for him. He understood that. The drone was looking for someone who had come up from the valley in the last 6 hours, and Cole had not come up in the valley in the last 6 hours. So the drone had no business with Cole. He had watched it disappear over the southern ridge. He'd taken another drink. He had told himself he was going to go inside in a minute. The knock came at 6:41. It was not the knock of a person who knew the cabin. The knock had a flag. Sharon had hung it the second visit, a small piece of yellow ribbon nailed to the porch column. I am not the law, she'd said when he asked, and he hadn't asked again. And the people who knew the cabin tapped the column twice before they came up the steps. This person had not tapped the column. He had picked up the bourbon bottle with his left hand, which was what he was holding when he opened the door. His right hand had been on the door frame at chest height, where the .45 was velcroed against the inside molding. Sharon had been on the other side of the door. She had been, on the other side of the door. She had been bleeding through the sleeve of her field jacket from a place above her left elbow, and her hair had been wet from the snow, and she'd been holding up another person, a man slumped, eyes closed, with the tactical kit half unbuckled, and a collective droplet sigil sewn inside the collar of his jacket, where the Federation could miss it. Cole, she had said. It had not been a question, it had not been a hello. It had been the way a person said another's name when they'd spent the last 20 minutes dragging a dying man up a snow-covered switchback and hoping the porch light at the top of the climb would be on when they remembered. In, Cole had said, and stepped aside. He set the bottle on the table without thinking about it. He'd taken the man's weight off her shoulder in one motion and laid him not on the floor in front of the wood stove, because the floor in front of the wood stove was the closest warmed, flat surface he had, and because his triage instincts had started running again somewhere between the first step and the second. He had moved like a man in remembered language. The Federation had drilled the language into him for 15 years, and he had not used it for a year, and his hands had remembered every verb. The man had been gut shot, through and through, low and to the right, exit wound clean. Cole's medic had once told him that low and to the right was a survivable kind, given the right hour and the right hands. It had been the wrong hour. There had been no right hands available except his, which had not held a clamp in 3 years. He had told Sharon to put pressure on the entry. He had gone to the cabin under the sink for the kit, where he kept in the back behind the bleach and the shoe polish, the kit that he had told himself he kept for hunting accidents. The kit that contained 4 things no hunter would ever need. He had worked, she had pressed. The cabin had filled with the smell of wood smoke and copper, and the particular wet leaf smell of a man who had been bleeding out long enough for his autonomic nervous system to start doing the quiet things it did at the end. Bitboy had taken one look at the room and gone up to the rafter beam and stayed there, quiet, watching in the way he did when the air pressure of a room had a certain shape. That should have been fixed, actually. 161. All right, and then this part up here, 163, right here, where it talks about 113 to 117 does not make any sense. There we go. The other one that I really didn't like when I read it, that just really like stuck in my mouth and my brain, was the part where he's talking about Taylor up here. Let's see here. Yeah, right here. 40, where it says sub-item C. Taylor was at this moment sitting at his console, 2 decks up, doing his job to mission spec, doing this small, clean version of his job a man like him did to keep his cover. That is a horrible writing right there. Excuse me. Excuse me. Taylor was at this moment. Sentence sucks. There we go. All right, now back to where we are with the guy dying in the cabin with Sharon and Cole. "20 minutes in, the second drone had passed. They'd heard it through the eaves. Sharon had not flinched. Cole had not stopped working. The drone had not come back. 40 minutes in, the man stopped breathing. Cole had tried twice. He had felt the second try go through him the way a wave went through a buoy, and he stopped, which was the part of being a medic he had hated most when he'd been a medic. Sharon had taken her hands off the entry wound. Her hands had been red to the wrist. She had looked at the man's face. She had not closed his eyes. Now, Sharon, let's see here, 171. Sharon went through medical school. She wouldn't just be holding pressure and letting Cole take the lead. She would be the lead on this, not Cole. All right, there we go. This is all stuff we can fix with Claude when we get our limit back on Monday. All right. Sharon had taken her hands off the entry wound. Her hands had been red to the wrist. She had looked at the man's face. She had not closed his eyes. His name was Cody. She had said, Cody. Cole had said, he had a wife. Sharon, she lives in Bakersfield. 183. Is this the wife's name? Or does Cole say Sharon for no reason? Question mark. And then also at the very top, she says Cole, but wouldn't know his name yet. Okay. She lives in Bakersfield. He had nodded. There had been nothing to say to that because in 15 years of the Federation, he had learned that the thing you said when someone said he had a wife was a dead man's name. And you said it again if asked, and that was all of it. She had stood up. She walked to the sink. She had washed her hands without taking off the field jacket. She had stood at the sink and let the water running for longer than the washing took. And Cole had not gone over to her because Sharon was not a person you went over to when she was at the sink. Sharon was a person you stood at the other end of the room from until she came back. Okay, this is the second time we see character do this. So Emily does this at the cabin first. And so it's repetitive. And then 195, Sharon was a person you stood at the other end of the room. That's a horrible line. Line sucks. Okay. She'd come back. She turned the water off. She had said, there's a third drone. He had said, I heard. It's running grids. It'll pick up the heat signature off the chimney in about 20 minutes. It won't. Cole, it'll pick up a chimney. There are 40 cabins in this valley. None of them are listed under my name. I bought it through the trust my mother set up for Emily, and I have not slept in it for any consecutive night that's on a record. Whew. Okay, so on 208, she still doesn't know his name. And 211, I bought it through the trust my mother set up. Okay, first of all, that sentence sucks. And second of all, he got the cabin from his uncle. Okay. There's no flag for the drone to read. She looked at him for a long time. She looked at the man on the floor and back at him. They followed me up the road, she had said. Then they followed you to a cabin. They didn't follow you to this cabin. You took the long switchback. The long switchback hits 4 cabins before it hits this one. She had absorbed this. She absorbed it the way she absorbed everything, quickly without performance. The part of her that had always known she was going to need the information she'd just been given. 224. She absorbed this. That's the same horrible trite language throughout the book. There we go. And if they come up to it, they won't. And if they come up to it, he looked at her. He looked at the dead man between them and the collective sigil sewn into the dead man's collar and the snow melting off her boots into a small dirty puddle on the cabin floor. And he let himself stand inside the question for a second. Then we'll figure it out, he said. Cole. Captain, you're a Federation officer, the federal pension, and a discharge that could be unmade with one phone call from the right colonel. I have a body in your living room, and I have a kit on the front. I have a kit in the truck out front, and I am going to be a felon. I'm going to be a felony as long as I have working blood pressure. Okay, well, none of that made any sense. Okay, so Chimney Christmas 241. Cole, which she still doesn't know. Captain. She might remember he's a Federation officer. She doesn't know or remember this. Just his face. Also, we just went up and he said that he was under indefinite personal leave, and now she's saying that he's has a federal pension and a discharge that could be unmade with one phone call. So I guess he could be on indefinite personal leave and have a federal pension, but let's just say the pension is at risk. And then let's see, on line 243, does she have a truck, or did they hike and climb up the switchbacks? Her and Cody. We got to pick a lane here. Okay. And then 244, I'm going to be a felony. I think she's going to be a felon, not a felony. All right. You can make this not be your problem in 8 minutes in one call. You should make this not be your problem. But she's saying he should turn her in. Oh my gosh. At one call, 8 minutes. No. She should in 2:45 she should offer to leave and not get him involved further. There we go. I know what I should do. Then do it. He had not done it. He had crossed to the kitchen instead, and he had picked up the bourbon bottle off the table where he'd set it 46 minutes ago. And he put it on the high shelf out of habit, because if he was going to be useful for the next 4 hours, he could not be drunk for the next 4 hours. He had said, help me with him. She had said, Cole. God, he still has not introduced himself at this point. She had Christmas. She had said, Cole, let's introduce him. To her, if she keeps saying his name. And by the way, some of these have been fixed already, and Claude just apparently never pushed the updates. Okay, yeah, she had helped him with him. They'd wrapped the man in blue tarp from the woodshed. They'd carried him out the back of the cabin to the root cellar. They'd set him on the cold dirt floor next to the pickling jars. Cole had said a thing he could not later remember the exact words of, but the shape of the thing he said was, "We will get you home, Cody." They'd latched the cellar door. The drone had not come. Inside, she had peeled out of the field jacket. Her arm had been bad. He had cleaned it and stitched it and bandaged it. He had used 6-pound test from his fishing tackle for the suture because the right thread was in the kit he didn't keep in his cabin anymore, and 6-pound test held knots and didn't react with skin. And a stitch was a stitch. She had not made a sound when the needle went in. She had talked him through the sutures, steady, specific, the instructions of a woman who'd finished medical school and walked away from it on purpose. See, why did she not do anything earlier? Okay, she had the training. She had chosen not to use it the way they intended. That was who Sharon was, qualified for a room she had left and more useful in the room she had chosen. She had watched him work. He had felt her watching him. It doesn't make sense. When he was done, he had washed his hands in the same sink that she washed hers in. He had not turned around. Why, she had said. He had taken a breath. He thought about it. He thought about the man in the cellar and the pebble of bourbon still in the back of his teeth, and the snow that had melted off her boots and was now a small, wet sock shape on the hardwood. And he had thought about the fact that the woman behind him would by tomorrow morning be back in the world she'd come out of, and the world she'd come out of would eat her if it could, and he would still be in his cabin on his porch with his bourbon and his monkey and his rocker. Okay, so this is the 270. $279 is the third time we have someone go to the sink and just stare at it and stay facing it. It's losing its effect. This part doesn't make sense either. Because the Federation can suck a rock, he had said. And you make better pancakes than anyone I know. Okay, so 292 She hasn't made pancakes yet. This is funny because I swear, like, I have fixed this in this book already 4 times. Oh, Claude, you're such a great tool. WTF. There we go. There had been a long quiet from behind him. I have only made you pancakes once. No, she hasn't. I extrapolated. She laughed. It had been a tired laugh, not a long one, and it had been the first sound in the cabin that had not been about the dead man. And it had carried something she'd been carrying alone since she'd come up the porch. She had turned around. She had been leaning against the kitchen island with one arm sleeve and a clean gauze and her hair coming out of its braid and her eyes on him in a way he had not seen anyone look at him since Federation had pinned the jackpot patch on his chest. She had said, Captain? Yeah, come here. He had gone there. He had reached into the inside pocket of the field jacket, draped over the chair behind her, and taken out a small leather pouch with a draw cord. She had loosened the cord. She had appended the pouch into her palm, and 3 black crystals had fallen out, the size of grapes, smooth as glass and dense as iron. Okay, he did it? No, she had reached into the inside pocket. And the cabin air had taken on the small, attentive feeling air took on around things that did not belong in the cabin. Day 3, she said. Day 3? Out of 15. Stable enough to handle, useful enough to trade. The collectum runs him down through Bakersfield and across the Mojave and into the state distribution channels we can reach. Cody was running these tonight. He had 3 more pouches in his kit. The ones in the truck got soaked when the truck went in the ditch, and we lost 2 of them. These are the ones I held. Okay, so it's actually day 3 out of 11. So 329 is wrong. All right. She had set the 3 crystals one at a time into Cole's open palm. His palm had taken in the weight of them. They'd been warmer than the room and colder than they should have been, and they hummed against his skin in a way that he would later, much later, in the cargo bay at Saturn, with his helmet still excelling, recognize as a thing the substance did when it noticed you. He had not known that then. He had only known that he was holding 3 illegal objects, and that the woman who had handed them to him was watching him with the expression a person made when they were about to trust him with something he could not give back. Wow. Sorry, guys. 341. He had only known that he was holding. Sentence sucks. There we go. Welcome to the collective, Captain, she had said. He looked at her. He looked at the crystals. Okay, 346. Sharon had never joined the collective. She was adjacent. So that's a dumb line. He had looked at her. He looked at the crystals. I'm not a captain anymore. You're the only captain in this room. He had closed his hand around them. Their first job together was 3 weeks later. She needed a driver, and he needed a reason to leave the cabin. They ran crystal relay through Bakersfield at 4 in the morning and nearly didn't make it back. A Federation patrol on the 99, headlights in the mirror, Cole cutting through an almond orchard at speed with the lights off while Sharon held the case in her lap and laughed. They sat across each other at a diner the next morning with pancakes and not much to say that needed saying. This was the morning it became permanent. Everything after the dead drops, the supply runs, the cabin years of shared crime, it was just the shape of what had already been decided at that dinner table. He had not technically joined the collective that night. He had never officially joined. He had simply stopped being the law and started being hers. And that distinction had carried him for the next 4 years, and had carried Sharon for the next 4 years, and it had carried them up to the day he had stood on a launch pad in the cold dawn and said in the pipe 5x5, and Sharon had been in the crowd 4 miles away with a red hair coming out of its braid, the way it had on the night with Cody. She had blown him a kiss across 4 miles of distance in a quarter-second delay, and that had been the last time he had seen her standing. Wait, what? He saw her from 4 miles away. Oh, Mama McGregory. Okay, first of all, there's a lot to unpack right there. 361. Hmm. 361. The book makes no mention of Emily or Sharon at the launch. They should, because it makes sense. So they should be there. However, like 6 days later, they had to get the crystals that they dropped off when Greenbaum kidnaps them. So there has to be another shipment. Oh, not shipment. What's it called? Another delivery of darker matter crystals after the one they got from Conrad. For the Greenbaum seem to make sense. To make chronological sense. All right. Oh yeah, and then 366. How the F does Cole see her 4 miles away? Interesting. He had made the copper wiring the evening before they left. Hummingbird feed wire from the porch, smooth pebble from the road. Okay, so line 368. That's the second time in this chapter that it says hummingbird feeder wire pebble. She was wearing it when he left from the launch. She had held his face with both hands in the cabin driveway and said, "You'd better come back to me, Kolnova." He had said, "Yes, ma'am." She had been wearing the ring when she said it. He had looked at it on her finger and thought, "That is the smallest thing I have ever made, and it is on the hand of the person I want to come home to." Okay, so 373. That is the smallest actually the whole sentence that starts with, he had looked at it on her small finger. On her small finger. Sentence sucks. There we go. She had not come back to him. He had come back in the smaller and harder sense that he was still oxygenating, and she had not. The ring was still on her finger, somewhere between here and Earth, and he could not reach either one. He came out of it slowly. Okay, let's pause there because that seems like a good spot. Yeah, that's 41 minutes for that first part. What's up, Believe in Yourself? Good to see you, man. Yeah, so that'll be the first part. We'll do a second part right here so that these aren't, hour and a half long chapters or beats to listen to. And we will catch you guys on the next one. If you want to learn more about this cryptocurrency project that's tied to the story and the art and some of the things inside of here, you can go to see. I was going like this on my screen. It's right here. When I watch the replays, it's over here. So I'm just going to go right here and say agproject.io. Connect your wallet with cryptocurrency. You can buy darker matter tokens, just like the crystals in the book. You can mint them into fuel cells, just like into the book. I think it's here. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, and check out our Telegram, t.me/anti-gravity saga. You can read the entire book from GitHub, just like I am. It's a public repo. And you don't have to wait for me to stumble through it and write these notes. But we will catch you. We'll catch you on the next one. And yeah, ciao.